What's up, guys? Thanks so much for checking out the channel. Today we have another one of our Hail Caesar faction reviews, and today we're going to be looking at Carthage. So the Carthage from the Punic Wars, basically. So I think there was an earlier Carthaginian list, but this one is basically the one that we would all expect. So Hannibal, and that particular era as well. So interesting list too. So it's got a lot of things going on, which definitely will require some thought and planning when you go to basically build and collect this type of list. So it is mainly infantry focused, and we have a weird sort of criteria here, which is normally we see like 25, 50, 75%, that kind of stuff. This one is 66%. So in other words, 2/3 of the units in the army have to be infantry, excluding skirmishers. So that's, I think, the first time we've honestly seen that in any of these factions. And then of that, Libyan spearmen have to be up to 25%, and again, excluding skirmishers. So some interesting things going on there. Calvary can bring in up to 25% of the list as well. So, and with the infantry in that, so basically we're getting to like 91% of the army, which is, again, just a weird thing. I wish they would have kind of found a different way to organize that just a little bit, just because then we have the elephants as well. But before we get to the elephants, so again, cavalry up to 1/4, and then light cavalry has to be half or more of your cavalry. So again, lots of things to think about there. Elephants, 1 in 10 units can be elephants, but really that's assuming you don't go full on the cavalry component, just so you can get that 10% in if you want to go that route. Divisions, at least 4 up there, 4 more excluding skirmishers, and must be led by a commander, of course, and then the skirmisher criteria there. So it's a fairly lengthy list too. So, and again, in that sense, it's good to have all that diversity, and it does have the ability to bring a lot of different looks and different features, tactics, things like that, that you can employ to deal with the enemy. But again, it's going to be a little bit of a pain maybe up front, just to make sure your army is organized and is satisfying all those criteria. Once you kind of have that mastered, then it's okay to then it'll be easier, I think, to really get the most out of it. So that being said, let's take a look and see what we get, guys. So we have that Libyan heavy infantry, which we're required to take some of, and very solid. So your typical heavy infantry stat line, 29 points a pop. And then we can upgrade to veterans, which is cool because there's no restriction on it. So really all of our Libyan spearmen could be veterans, which is nice because it brings in elite phalanx and tough fighters, which is really solid. For another 7 points, so that's a fairly expensive upgrade. But again, you're getting 3 awesome special abilities. That being said, it would have been nice if the just regular version would have had phalanx at least, just so you can have a little bit of I guess more of a special rule for them. But I mean, on the other hand, you're getting 3 things for 7 points there, and they're all pretty relevant abilities, so that's actually pretty neat. But like I said, I think phalanx probably would have been okay to have on the regular version. Then we get something kind of bonkers, but still really cool that this list can throw at people. So you get Gallic medium infantry warbands with swords and javelins, a massive clash of 9, of course drops down significantly to 6, and obviously not quite as good of a morale save, but they have wild fighters, so you get access to that in quantity, 28 points a unit here. But then if we wanted to upgrade into large units, which might be worth having 1 or 2 of these just to throw at the enemy and kind of scare the crap out of them, but a massive clash value of 8, and then dropping to an 8, or sorry, clash of 11 dropping to an 8, which is pretty frightening still. The morale stave is still 5 up, but again, that's a bucket of dice there, and also still the wild fighters, but again, going to run you 35 points for a large unit there. Then we have, again, sort of a mishmash of various allies as well in the rest of the infantry. So we have Italian allied medium infantry with spears or javelins, so about what you'd expect for medium infantry, nothing special there. 23 points a pop. Celtiberian medium infantry warband with Pila, which is pretty neat as well. A little bit more expensive, but on the other hand, you're getting another medium infantry unit that does throw 9 dice on the clash value. Is pretty solid there. Spanish Scutari, medium infantry with Pila as well. Again, back down to 23 points there. And aside from having Pila, nothing too special there. So typical medium infantry stat lines. Then we have the Spanish, and I'm going to butcher this, K-Trotty light infantry with javelins as small units. So again, just your typical small harassing type of unit there. Definitely don't want those guys in close combat. Ligurian light infantry with javelins, though. Interesting that they get that typical light infantry stat line there because they're not a small unit and do actually come with a t-shirt save there on the morale side. 20 points a pop there. Skirmishers, we get our typical flavors that you would expect here, but all small units. So with javelins, again, we can give up to half of our skirmisher units slings if you want some long range ability, and then one unit could also be Balearic slingers, which is pretty sweet, basically the best of the best there, and they'll get marksmen. And then we could go with bows instead of javelins, and they're basically Numidian bowmen, again, for some long-range ability there. So, and that's really about the only long range in the whole list. So certainly fairly powerful on the short-range side there with lots of javelin access, but, that's about it on the long-range side there. So you got some slingers and some bowmen, but not too many. All right, then we get into the cavalry side. So we have Libby/Phoenician medium cavalry as small units, and about what you would expect from a small cavalry unit. So they can certainly do a little bit of work, but that stamina value is not going to help them last for too long. And no special rules there. But we could make one of them a guard unit, which will essentially be in the general's division, but they are elite. So an elite small medium unit, which is a little bit weird to think of, but nonetheless kind of a cool idea as well. So they can be a bit of a surprise there. So and there's a little bit more to look at. So we have some light cavalry options there. Javelin, small units, basically, again, fast, sort of harassing cavalry. Don't expect too much out of them. We could upgrade one of them to Numidians, or actually not just one, multiple to Numidians, so that's actually pretty neat there if we're wanting to get basically feign flight in quantity, so that opens up an interesting tactical option there. Then we have Gallic/Spanish medium cavalry allies, and again, that brings you a little bit more of the muscle just because they're not small units. So normal size cavalry at 27 points a pop, about what you'd expect from medium cavalry. One unit, interestingly, we could upgrade to tough fighters, so you might as well do it for 1 point. That seems like a no-brainer, certainly. Then we do get access to elephants, and we'll cover elephants in just a completely separate video at some point. But if you really want to get that, if you're having your army led by Hannibal, for example, not taking elements, I think, would be not just a shame, but almost a crime. You really do need to do that. That being said, again, only up to 10% of the list having them is a bit rough. So, depending on the size of the game, you certainly want to take advantage of that. I feel like that probably could be a little bit higher, but again, this list has some wonky restrictions going on. So that being said, there's a lot of flexibility with house ruling stuff here. So, I would probably be fine with up to like 15% of the list being elephants, but that's just me. But anyway, 23 points a pop there. And then we do have our solid leadership 8 across the board, which is good because, again, there's just with all the different restrictions and moving pieces of this list, you do want to make sure you can actually get your orders off. There is a lot of power in the list, but it's going to take a solid general to basically bring all that forward. That being said, we can also upgrade to leadership 9 there, and you would essentially probably be thinking that would be Hannibal. Kind of wish they would have mentioned that by name there, but well worth it just because, again, this list does have a lot of hidden potential. Not so much hidden potential, but just there's potential there. It's just, again, with the restrictions, it can be a little bit rough, I think, getting the max value out of this. And, especially with infantry dominating the list and trying to squeeze in cavalry and elephants and everything as well and getting the best value out of everything, it could be a little bit tough. So just something to think about there, but nice that it is one of those rare lists that lets you get to leadership 9. So, I guess if you really want to handicap yourself, keep it at leadership 8, but I would certainly leave the points available so that you can get that leadership 9 general, because then it starts making things a lot easier, and you can be a little bit more aggressive with your overall strategy that you want to accomplish. So overall, really cool list. That being said, and we covered this in a recent SPQR video, but it's great that there's a list for Carthage and Hail Caesar, at least, even though it's not in SPQR, but model-wise, just absolutely conspicuous by their absence in Warlord's catalog, and that's really a shame, just because with this being such a prominent enemy of Rome, with the 3 Punic Wars being fought, there is really no reason that these guys don't have a model line yet for Warlord. And it's just, again, it's a shame. That being said, Victrix does have a very wonderful all-plastic range of Carthaginian models, so that would be my personal preference for starting. That being said, some people like their metals, which is fine too. So, and I'm sure there's any number of other companies out there that make models for that, but my personal preference would just be to get it all in plastic. So let me know in the comments how much you either like or dislike that. Anyway, the Carthaginians, really solid list here, as you would expect, especially if you're having this essentially led by Hannibal. That being said, it's got some of the most interesting, shall we say, list building restrictions here. With it again being a mainly infantry focused list, but also kind of showing that a lot of the army was composed of various allied peoples and stuff like that. That being said, again, I wish that I think the elephants should be maybe bumped up a little bit as far as access to them. 10% just seems a little bit low. But again, you wouldn't want to make this 100% elephant focused either. So I don't know. It'd be one to play around with a little bit. And again, I personally feel like it could probably be bumped up to like 15% of the list somehow. But nonetheless, lots of good things going on here. There's missile-wise, that's probably the one deficiency of the army, right? There's not a lot of potential for reaching out to long range and hurting people. You basically have that in your skirmisher unit forms down there. But again, overall, it's not much. It's going to be a somewhat slower list overall, too. There are some cavalry options, but a lot of it's small unit. And again, with the restrictions on cavalry there, the elephants aren't really going to be like the speed element of your list anyway. So in that sense, it's going to be a little bit of a slower moving beast, but it does have a lot of potential in there. So, you have your sort of line infantry units of the Libyan long spear units, basically just consider them like hoplite type or phalangite type infantry. Not quite as good overall as them, but you do have access to veterans sort of on demand if you want to pay the point cost there with what your within your restrictions, basically, of what you are allowed to take from the Libyans. But having elite phalanx and tough fighters across multiple units is pretty nasty. That being said, bringing in sort of like the secret weapon, I would say, almost of this list is those Gallic Warbands, and you could easily catch an opponent by surprise with just plopping those things down on the field, right? And wherever possible, I think it's worth just considering maybe if you have the points but also the models, trying fielding a couple as large units just to mess with people. And that's pretty intimidating again when that thing is throwing 11 dice at you in the clash, but then 8 afterwards still, which is still pretty bonkers, and wild fighters on top of it. So. And you can use that to almost intimidate and distract the enemy from the other threats that your list is bringing, which again, just unit after unit of those Libyan blocks, and then various smaller units, some of the medium units here even. You do have the Celtiberians as a warband too, just as a slightly cheaper option, although without the wild fighters aspect to it. So might not be worth it from that end. You might as well, if you want the wild fighters, just have multiple Gallic units. Celtiberians really just for flavor, I guess, if you want to model something different. They seem pretty similar otherwise. But, again, you're going to be let down a little bit on the long-range firepower, but that being said, you want to basically get to grips with the enemy as fast as you can there, and having Leadership 9 potentially will help you do that. Cavalry is going to be solid. You do have some interesting options there, like the elite small guard unit of cavalry. The one unit of that is going to be a little bit interesting to see what you can really get out of that. But I think it's really with the other cavalry options, which again we'll just kind of show for here just a little bit. So basically having Numidians, access to multiple Numidians on the infantry side, but also the cavalry, it certainly opens up some really nasty and kind of annoying hit and run abilities there, which can make up for the lack of true long-range firepower. certainly worth considering there, and using that to, again, also distract the enemy from some of your just real other threats, not just the like Gallic Warbands and stuff. Speaking of Gallic, you could also bring in some of their medium cavalry as allies, and again, just having access to potential multiple units of that as just solid medium cavalry, and then again taking that one unit of tough fighters as their cavalry, you might as well. It's one more point. And then, on top of all that, you can throw elephants at the enemy. So just really good stuff overall. Again, if you have access and the ability to take Leadership 9, you might as well pay the points for it. And that certainly opens up a lot of other little bit more aggressive play. So overall, the Carthaginians are definitely a really solid list. I would say, again, it's a shame that these guys don't have more attention from Warlord, and certainly as far as models go. That being said, Victrix, again, does have a really wonderful plastic range for them. I think even including the elephants, right? So there's lots of good stuff that you can do there. But let us know in the comments, guys. What do you think of the Carthaginians? Have you collected them? Have you played against them? Have you, refought some of those Punic War battles? What do you think? Do you think this list is up there as far as just being one of the more powerful ones? Have you played battles that are not just Rome versus Carthage, but other things as well? So yeah, just let us know in the comments. We'll be happy to hear from you guys. Thanks so much for stopping by again, guys. Hope you guys have a good one. We'll see you down the road.